You guys, I have a camera. I feel like a big girl. Hopefully the video looks better. The sound, I don't know. I really don't know how cameras work, so you can also probably see my skin way clearer. This is gonna take some getting used to. Anyway, welcome to my January and February wrap up. I ended up reading a total of 11 books over the past 2 months, which honestly isn't a lot. However, 3 of those books were 700 to 800 pages each. So as you can imagine, that took up quite a bit of my time. I definitely read quite a mix of books. I read some very popular books, some very anticipated reads for me personally, and I do feel like I ended up with some very conflicting feelings. But let's get into it. The very first book I chose to start out the year with was Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh. And Ottessa Moshfegh, she is something special. I have read a good handful of her books, and she just has this very special talent of being able to gross you out, but like you kind of like it. It's like you're seeing something you shouldn't, but you cannot make yourself look away, or you're learning people's secrets. That's how these books make me feel. And just the sheer number of times that I said ew out loud to myself as I was reading this book. I also just really like to talk to myself, so maybe that's it, but like I was having out loud reactions to this book. This is about a young woman named Eileen. She's a secretary at a juvenile boys prison. This is set in the 60s, I think. Yes, 1964. And there is a plot to this. This is so much more focused on the characters, mostly the main character, Eileen. This is first person from Eileen's point of view, so we are getting all of her thoughts as they're happening. We are getting the inner workings of her brain. We are truly getting all of this character. And let me tell you, her mind was such an interesting place to be. She is not meant to be a likable character whatsoever, and she does a lot of things that I would not do. However, I still found her slightly relatable in some aspects. Keyword some, because most of the time she does and says and thinks some very questionable things. So please, like, I do not identify with this main character. There were just some things here or there that she did or said, and I was kind of like, girl, I get it. Like, for example, here's one of the quotes that I underlined. I liked to think of my brain like that, tangled up in my skull. The idea that my brains could be untangled, straightened out, and thus refashioned into a state of peace and sanity was a comforting fantasy. And then she says, I could be very dramatic in my self-assessments. Like, girl, I get it. And she also says, having to breathe was an embarrassment in itself. This was the kind of girl I was. I'm talking about those little things, okay? There is like a thrillery kind of crime aspect happening in the background, but I was so much more wrapped up in Eileen and her as a character and just all of her thoughts. And this was a very quick read for me. I did really like it. I really like Ottessa Moshfegh's writing in general. Like, she just writes such raw, gross things, but in a very matter-of-fact, casual way. And it's a very odd combination, but it works. Next, I actually started my Crescent City reread, but I want to talk about all of those together, so hold that thought. This I actually read somewhere in between all of those. This is Before We Were Innocent by Ella Berman, one of the books that I was able to knock off my massive physical TBR that I currently have. This was a part of my New Year book haul, and one of my goals, resolutions, was to read more books that I find kind of just browsing at the store naturally, instead of just reading books that I see on TikTok or reading books that I see on YouTube, like books that I find myself. And this was one of those books. Oh, also another one of my New Year's goals was to stop doing star ratings, and let me tell you, I feel so much freer now. I used to think way too hard about how many stars to give a book, so I literally just stopped. I stopped thinking about it. So that's why I won't be giving any actual star ratings for these books. This is about a group of 3 friends. Their summer after their senior year of high school, they all take a trip to Greece. They were rich, and only 2 of them come back alive because one of the friends dies in this very horrific accident. It becomes like this international news story, this international true crime story. The other 2 friends are kind of implicated in having some involvement in their other friend's death. There's all this public speculation. The girls' lives are basically ripped apart because the general public thinks that they murdered their best friend. They're never formally convicted, so now it's 10 years later. The two remaining friends have kind of become estranged from one another. The one friend kind of like disappears. She retreats from society, like she does not want to be in the public. And then the other friend goes the complete opposite direction and becomes like a self-help famous motivational speaker. So now they've come back into each other's lives and things get stirred up as they do. I really was not feeling this at first. It did take a little bit of time for me to get into. There were so many things that I ended up liking about this and so many things that I felt like the author did well. First of all, the vibes were there. Not the point of the book, but the vibes were there. The earlier part of the book does take place in like 2008, I think, so there was like that 2000s nostalgic feel to it. And it was also just like very atmospheric with the whole Greek summer. Like I really felt like I was fighting with my best friend on a cliffside next to the Greek Ocean, which is another thing that I really liked about this book. The author created such a real friendship dynamic between these three girls, so tangible, just so realistic. The power struggles between the three of them, how toxic they were to each other, but just like how complicated teenage friendships can be. I just literally felt like I was a part of this friend group, and the things that were happening to them or the things that they were doing and saying to each other, I felt like they were happening to me. I just love books about raw girlhood and like kind of like the darker parts of girlhood, which I'm gonna talk about again later in this video, but this was just one of those books for me and I very much enjoyed this. So as I said, in January I also did an entire Crescent City reread. I read and annotated both House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath. These are what these two books look like and I am very proud of it. In the last vlog that I posted, I talked all about how I annotated these and all of the different supplies that I used to annotate, but this basically felt like I was studying for a test. I was underlining and tabbing character descriptions, world building, magic descriptions, anything that could be connected to anything else. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about these two because I really have talked about them too much. I mainly want to focus on this, which was the whole reason for the reread. House of Flame and Shadow, the third book in the Crescent City series, came out at the end of January. This is probably my most anticipated release of the entire year. And I have to tell you, I think I probably digested 25% of this book. 25% of this. Don't worry, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but this was getting and has been getting a ton of mixed reviews. A lot of people were disappointed by it, and I can understand why. If you read these books or any of her series for the vibes, for the romance, which is fine because I too love the vibes and the romance, but if that is the main thing you're looking for in these books, then this is probably not going to do it for you. This was so much more focused on the lore and the history, you know, putting all of the pieces together. So the people who read for those reasons, they are the people who are going to love this, because this is so much more, I would say it's so much more sci-fi action-y than kind of vibes and fantasy and fun and romance. And that is why I say I digested probably about a quarter of this, because there was so much history, there were so many answers to so many questions, so many different connections were made, and I do feel like I probably need a reread of this in order to fully understand it and digest it all. But that is not a journey I will be embarking on anytime soon. I do definitely wish that we would have gotten more of just the characters existing with each other and interacting with each other. Like, Sarah was not letting any of them have fun. They were all just fearing for their lives the entire time. The character interactions was something I was looking forward to upon the ending of House of Sky and Breath, and I definitely thought we were going to get more of that. So that was a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, it did give me a lot of other things that I wanted. So, oh wait, I read one other book in January. I almost forgot. This is The First Day of Spring by Nancy Tucker. This is one book that I have had on my TBR for probably over a year. I finally decided to buy it and read it. And based off of the synopsis of this alone, I was very much expecting just your average thriller. Fast-paced, non-emotional. And boy, was I wrong. This is about a little girl named Chrissy, and when she is 8 years old, she commits murder. She kills a little boy from her neighborhood. This is dual timelines, so we do get her point of view as an 8-year-old, but we are also getting her point of view years later. She's grown and she is now a mother. She has a daughter of her own. When I tell you, I have never wanted to hug a little murderer before, but this made me want to do that. This little girl in this story made me so sad, and I simply was not expecting to feel that. But as you read this, you understand You understand her life, you understand her as a character. I'm not saying you understand murder, but like you just understand her life circumstances and kind of that childlike justification of things you don't quite understand. I said in one of the videos that I was reading this that the main character reminds me of Junie B. Jones. If Junie B. Jones had been severely neglected as a child. I don't know. I was just not expecting this to be the tender, like beautiful story that it turned out to be. This was definitely one of my favorites of the past 2 months and I very much recommend. Okay, moving on to February. Because February is the month of love, the month of Valentine's Day, I decided to branch out and read some romance books. I do have a whole reading vlog on that if you want to go watch it. Now I've said this many times, you're probably sick of it by now, but I'm just not a huge romance reader. I'm definitely like romance adjacent. You know, I love a good romantasy, but romance on its own just doesn't quite do it for me. However, I am about to sound like a huge hypocrite because I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez and I absolutely loved this. This was my first Abby Jimenez book. I had heard nothing but amazing things about her writing and about this book specifically, and all of that was proven right. This is about two doctors who work in the same hospital. They kind of get off on the wrong foot with each other. He has really bad social anxiety and she just has a bunch of stuff going on in her life. She's healing from a really bad divorce. Her brother's really sick. There are just all of these things going on with the two main characters individually. So in order to kind of like make amends with one another, they start writing notes to each other and leaving each other notes. They start fake dating for different reasons that I will not mention. And it goes from there. This was just so sweet. I thought it was so well written. It was funny. The way that the two main characters understood each other was amazing, because even though they are fake dating, they're still friends. They still like each other as people, and the way that she understands his anxiety and protects him, just the way that she gets him, I loved so much. This was just such a feel-good, happy read. I was literally confused about the feeling that this book was giving me. I did not know what it was, and then I realized it was literally just happiness. Like, it was making me feel giddy. It was just such a nice break from the very intense, dark books that I normally am reading, and I will 100% be reading more of Abby Jimenez. I really hope you have not been able to hear my stomach gurgling this whole entire time. So next I read two very popular books, and this is where my conflicted feelings come in. I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I finished this feeling very neutral. I honestly felt very neutral the entire time that I was reading this. And I think I've come to the conclusion that I appreciated this, but I didn't really like it. I didn't dislike it, but I definitely did not fall in love with it the way that I know so many other people have. In the video that I read this, I described this as a love story, but not a romance, because it is definitely about love between two people, how love can keep two people in each other's lives, how people's lives or circumstances affect the way that they do express love or, you know, fit together. But calling this a romance definitely does not do it justice. I don't know. Maybe one day I will reread this and find a whole new love for it, but as of right now, I just appreciate it. I am still watching the show though. I haven't finished that yet, and I do like it. In that same video, I also read Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings, and never has a book made me feel the way that this one did. I disliked so many things in this book, yet something in me is hungry for more. Again, this is another fan favorite. These books are so wildly popular. I've honestly had this on my TBR for so long just because of the way that people talk about these books, and I finally decided to experience it for myself. My experience taught me that I have never hated a character more than I hate BJ. If you are unaware, this book is about a very toxic, messy, complicated relationship between two people, and it is made out to seem like both parties are equal contributors to the toxicity. And in my humble opinion, I don't think there is anything Magnolia could do that would make that true. I am a Magnolia sympathizer and a BJ hater. All I wanted the entire time I was reading this was for Magnolia to get her revenge, and I don't understand how people root for them as a couple. I have decided though that I am going to keep reading these. I do have the next Daisy Hates book in my possession. I actually have the next Magnolia book too. That's disgusting. This was actually the first of these books that I got. I bought it like months ago when it was $8 off of Amazon, so that's why it's a completely different size. I do think I'm gonna like the Daisy Hates books more. I just think I'm gonna like those characters more. I do understand what everyone is saying about Jessa Hastings' writing. It is as beautiful as everyone says it is. I just think I would have loved the writing if it was referring to a couple that I actually liked. But seriously, Magnolia could stab BJ and I would be happy for her. Sorry, I probably shouldn't be inciting violence, but 2 more books to go. I have 1 memoir this month. I read Elvis and Me by none other than Miss Priscilla herself. I just recently watched the Priscilla movie by Sofia Coppola, which is based on this memoir, and I just became hyper fixated on Elvis and Priscilla. Mostly Priscilla, because Elvis, most of my exposure to Elvis came from, yes, Lilo and Stitch, but also The Game Plan with The Rock, because for some reason The Rock's character was obsessed with Elvis. But other than that, he really wasn't on my radar. So all of this was new to me. Like I said, watched the Priscilla movie, loved it. So I decided to read this, and this just made me feel so many things. Mostly sadness for Priscilla, a lot of anger for her as well. If you don't know, Priscilla was 14 years old when she met Elvis, who was 25, I don't know. But she met this man at 14, and then from there on out, her entire life was consumed by him. And he did some very shitty things to her. This really is all about how she was the truest example of groomed in her very formative early teenage years, and how she really doesn't find herself until after their relationship when she's kind of like in her late 20s. And the way that Priscilla and her co-author wrote this, it is still full of so much love and admiration for this man. You know, it's very honest. She does acknowledge a lot of hard and difficult things, but she still speaks of Elvis with so much love. And she even acknowledges him and views him as a victim himself, as a victim of fame and as a victim of all of the people around him who took advantage of him. I'm on Priscilla's side. This was really good. I also thought the movie did a phenomenal job of capturing this and capturing the feelings that she writes about. So if you liked the movie, then you should definitely read this too. But lastly, I read Brutes by Diz Tate. This was another very, very highly anticipated read for me. It's been out for a while, but I was waiting for it to come out in paperback to read it. I don't know where to start with this. Mostly because I don't even know what actually happened in this book. So very basically, this is about a group of 13-year-old girls in Florida. This other girl who was a year older than them goes missing. This group of girls is very obsessive. That's all. That's all. No, but seriously, I could not tell you the events that actually physically take place in this book. And not in like the fever dream, you don't know what's real, you don't know what's not way, because I like those books. Bunny by Mona Awad, one of my favorite books. No, you don't actually know what's happening because it is so confusing that nothing actually makes sense. There were some really, really good pieces of writing in this. Like I actually have, I don't know if you can see because they're yellow, but I actually have so many sentences and paragraphs annotated and tabbed. And it does have all of those things that I mentioned earlier in the video about girlhood, you know, that raw, dark side of it, how cruel preteens can be, you know, and how your identity is found in your friends at that point, and just like influence and hunger and like all of these themes that I usually really like pertaining to girlhood. But literally just nothing made sense. I don't know if I just didn't get it, but this was disappointing for me. But those were officially all of the books that I have read over the past 2 months. I would say that most of these were successes. I'm very happy that I was able to get some of these off of my TBR because I still have so many books that I need to get to, and I just keep buying more. So thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you decide to stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.